was really young. I think his brother came through there as well. And then he got scooped up by the Everton Academy, I think when he was 15. And then when he was there, he was a central midfielder initially, and then didn't really develop into a centre forward until a little bit later. I can't quite remember the exact date actually, but I think it was there was this one specific game against Manchester City in the academy where they were 4-0 down, I think, at halftime, and he got brought on as a 10, and he scored, I think, 3 goals, maybe 4, against, I think, Phil Foden's Manchester City, actually. And from that point on, that kind of converted him into a centre forward, and the coaches thought he had a bit about him. He always had a little bit about him going forward at that age, but I think that at that point they decided, like, all right, maybe we'll try you up top for a few games, and it worked out. His goal scoring record in the under-18 Premier League was really good. I think he scored 17 and 20 or 21 off the top of my head. It was almost a goal every game. So really dominated at that level, and started to make a breakthrough into the first team. Made his debut in the Europa League for Everton, but never really got the break. Never really, and it didn't really seem like he was going to get too many first team opportunities after that. I think I can't remember who gave him his debut. It might have been, I can't quite remember, but whoever it was, they left, and he kind of had to start again. And then eventually went on loan to Kortrijk in Belgium. I'm not really sure how that one came about, to be honest. But he went on loan there and did all right in the beginning, but the team struggled, essentially, and he eventually got dropped. And then the surprise, I suppose, was last summer was that Rem came in for him. And by all accounts, they'd been looking at him and keeping tabs on him since he had been a youth player at Everton. They'd been admirers of him. They kind of thought he would fit their system well. And having watched Rem last season, subsequently, it made sense to me. I could see why they could see that fit. So they signed him, brought him in, I think with the expectation that they would lose one of their strikers last summer. That didn't happen. Boulaye Dia stuck around. And yeah, from there, they've got a couple of other young players as well that have developed, I think, faster than they thought. Yeah. So Hornby's been sidelined a bit. He's not really had the chance to settle or get too much game time. I think he's played half an hour at most. And then it's went to go out on loan to get some game time, obviously, with, I think, for him, with the Euros in the back of his head. Yeah. But also just to develop. He's 21 and he needs to be playing first team football. He's only played less than 20 senior games, I think. So, yeah, that's how we got to here.
And kind of despite the fact he's got a really good record for the Scotland youth setup, and as he's came on, most fans, a lot of fans, I'd say, even including myself, really, as an Aberdeen fan, we're not really heard of him. Really, I've not seen too much of him. So, can you kind of just describe what his attributes are as a player and how you could see him fitting into the team?
Yeah, so I think the obvious thing is that he's big, right? He's 6'4", 6'5". I think when he was younger, that was a big advantage for him. It's faded away a little bit. I don't think he's maybe not as physical as he kind of looks. He's very good in the air, like in build-up play and winning balls sort of halfway up the pitch. He's not the best header of the ball when it comes to finishing or anything like that. But in general, his hold-up play is really good. I think that's probably where the similarity Aberdeen fans might hope to see with Cosgrove when it comes to leading the line. I think he's maybe got a bit more guile and technique than his size might lead you to believe. People kind of might think of him as some lumbering forward, but he's got a good touch. He's good at bringing other players into play, and he likes to drop deep at times. Maybe a little bit too much, I think, sometimes, but he does like to drop a little bit back, and that might be reminiscent of him having been a midfielder. But he likes to play in the half spaces. He likes to bring in wide players. He likes to have runners going beyond him. And he can pick a pass at times and do that sort of thing. I'm not sure, you'll know Aberdeen better than me. I'm not sure if that's exactly what Aberdeen need. But he has that to his game. And as far as being a forward goes, he's a decent enough finisher. He's comfortable hitting the ball with both feet. Can be instinctive when he needs to. Has a pretty... this sample size is tiny, right? Because he's not played a lot of senior minutes, but his sort of shots conversion rate's pretty good. He takes chances quite well in general. And another big, I think, plus point for him, not sure how this will translate to Aberdeen so much, but his defensive work's good. He's quite intelligent when it comes to pressing centre-backs and working within a system. And I think it's one of the things that Rem saw in him, because they're obviously quite a defensive-minded team in Ligue 1. They play a very specific brand of football that requires someone who can press intelligently and sort of fit into the system that relies quite heavily on different pressing triggers and things like that. And he's quite good at that. Whether he'll need to kind of use that sort of stuff at Aberdeen, I'm not so sure, because probably a bit more dominant on the ball than Rem would be in Ligue 1, for example.
Yeah. Kind of leads on to the next question, almost similar to what you're saying, is in terms of how he fits into the system, because I don't know how much of what you watch of Aberdeen, but our kind of style of play heavily relates on kind of getting wing backs pushed up into wide areas, and then subsequently them getting the ball into the box. Would you think he'll really thrive off of that?
Yeah, so I think in theory he could, right? So some of the things I said, he likes to drop deep and collect the ball. If he has wing backs running beyond him and people he can feed in, that's obviously helpful for him. And in the same token, he's quite a good instinctive finisher in the box. So if he has crosses coming in, particularly, again, I think people think because he's tall, he's some great header of the ball. I think particularly low crosses that he can tap away or instinctively take. He would be good for him, would benefit him. I also think, saying previously about how he fit into the REM system, the times he has been in like a more ball dominant side are the Scotland under 21 games when they've played poorer sides. Granted, take it with a pinch of salt. It's under 21 football. They're playing San Marino and he's scoring a hat trick. But when he's been in situations where he's in a dominant team, he's done well and he's scored quite a lot of goals. So pinch of salt, but I think it's a positive, and I think being at a club like Aberdeen is really good for him and could help build his confidence. Obviously, last night wasn't great, but it'll take a little bit of time to settle.
Yeah, given the fact he's not really kicked the ball for months, has he? So,
no, he's not played. He's played 30 minutes this season. So,
and kind of related to what you said there about the Scotland youth setup, he's obviously familiar with the likes of Lewis Ferguson, Ross McCrory, and Conor McLennan as well. So, you think that's how important you think that's going to be and help him settle in, given the fact a young British player has gone abroad for the best part of 2 years when you take in that loan spell into account as well.
Yeah, I think that'll be massive for him. And to be honest, I think it's probably been the decisive factor in him going to Aberdeen. There was a lot of interest. I think the REM president said there was 11 or 12 teams initially interested in him. And I know that one was an Eredivisie club and one was a Zweite Bundesliga club, so second division in Germany. But from what I know of that, it was a team pushing for promotion as well. So a big club, if you think of the teams pushing for promotion in Germany, you're talking about Kiel and Hamburg and Hanover, teams that have 50,000 seater stadiums. So for him to pick Aberdeen over those clubs, I think is a big deal. And I think the fact that he'll have been in a comfortable environment with pals, essentially, will have been a big factor. And as you say, COVID probably plays a part in that as well. Just being able to, obviously he's not from Scotland or from Aberdeen, but being able to come back to the UK and be around people he knows, having been stuck in France with people who predominantly speak French who he doesn't know. Like, I think that's a massive factor.
Yeah. And again, I sort of mentioned there, by his own admission, he knows himself that in the last since he joined Rem before that he hasn't played as much as he'd like. So how long do you think it might take for him to kind of get up to speed? Because the Scottish game is quite notoriously, high tempo, high pace as well. Yeah,
I think it'll be tough for him to the first couple of weeks. He's in good shape in general, and like he's. I'm trying not to oversell his physicality, but he's not like he's a physical enough guy. He is a big guy. I just I kind of want to taper expectations. That I think people see that he's 6'4", 6'5", and they think he's going to be Ibrahimovic. You know what I mean? He's still a big guy. He'll be comfortable enough, and I think he'll be fine with the tempo and stuff after a few weeks. Ligue 1's not necessarily that slow either. So I think he'll get used to it quite quickly. It might take a settling in period though.
Yeah. And the Aberdeen are having a fairly poor season, especially recently, particularly struggling to score goals. So I think the onus with Cosgrove leaving as well, getting a good bit of money for him. I know we've signed a couple of other players, Florian Camberry and Callum Hendry as well, but do you think the onus is really going to be on him to kind of kick them back into gear and maybe push on for a more successful, end to the season?
I think probably not. So I think the recruitment strategy there has been to replace Cosgrove's goals with. So if you get 5 from Henry, 5 from Hornby, and 5 from Canberry, then you're all right. So sort of divide and conquer sort of approach rather than bringing in one person, which is a sensible thing to do when you've got someone that's scoring at quite a fairly prolific rate, and you have to replace them. Putting all your eggs in one basket and just signing one guy to do the job isn't the most sensible approach, I don't think. So from that perspective, I don't think there's too much pressure. As well, I think expectations are probably tapered by the fact that things you've mentioned before, he's not played a lot of senior football. He's not played in 6 months. There's obviously excitement and buzz because he's the Scotland under-21 record goal scorer. Like he's a young Scottish striker that everyone wants to do well. So I see that side of it as well. I think for him, there'll be pressure, sort of internal pressure on himself. He wants to kick on. He wants to do well. He's not scored a senior goal since he was at Kortrijk. So I think for him, there'll be more pressure, I think, coming from him from within himself than there would be from Aberdeen staff or anything like that. But yeah, I think it's more of a divide and conquer approach with the signings they've brought in.
And the final question, really, you alluded to it a bit earlier as well about the Euros coming up for Scotland. And given the fact that we have been fairly short, I know Lyndon Dykes has kind of established himself as the number one. You've got Ollie McBurney as well, but do you think he maybe has an outside chance of perhaps sneak into that squad if he can score a few goals between now and the summer?
Yeah, I think he'd have to really hit the ground running. So I think for him to have a realistic chance, just based on how Steve Clarke set it up and that sort of club mentality he's tried to establish, I don't see him dropping too many players. So as much as some Scotland fans don't like Ollie McBurney or don't like Ollie Burke, I think they'll probably be there unless something miraculous happens or they get injured. So if Hornby scores 5 goals in the next 5 games and can squeeze his way into the March squad, then he might have a chance. But for me, I think he would have to really force his way into the squad in March, which is obviously a month away now. For him to have a chance, I couldn't really foresee him not getting called up in March and then squeezing his way into the Euros. I think after the March friendlies, Clarke will have probably decided.
Set in stone, yeah.
Yeah, you would think. But barring injuries or anything like that, I think the thing for him though is that he has to keep it in his mind that it's a possibility, and someone might get injured. People get injured all the time. Someone might drop out. So if he can keep scoring goals and keep his name in the headlines, then there's no reason that he couldn't be on standby for the Euros at least.